You've probably heard that Wayland can't support screensavers, and that's just not true. It's actually never been true. Kind of. It depends on what you mean by a screensaver. If what you want is a full screen thing that plays an animation and then closes on user input, this has always been possible. It's effectively how a game works. However, when people say screensaver, part of the reason why they say they don't work, and part of the reason why the XScreensaver dev 2 years ago said, Wayland does not support screensavers, it does not have any provision that allows screensavers to even exist in any meaningful way. If you value screensavers, that's kind of a problem. Is because screensavers and screen locking are usually bundled together. Oftentimes when you want to have a screensaver run, you want to have the system lock in the background so that, people can't just come along and then access your system. If we're talking about a home system, it doesn't really matter. If we're talking about a laptop that you carry around or you're in an office, things like that, screen locking is pretty important. In a general sense, now, you could do things for individual environments, but generally speaking, that is what couldn't be done before. You couldn't have a system that is doing screen locking and screen saving together, and then have that be something that is portable across different environments. At least if you want a proper working screensaver. There were some hacks in the past where you had a full screen window, and then it kinda pretended to be a lock screen. It would disable user input and do some other things like that. The problem is there are a lot of ways to get around them, and it just wasn't a good solution. But this hasn't been the case for a while now. There has been a portable solution, and even XScreensaver is working on this. As of about 8 months ago, XScreensaver 6.11, this is a Unix-only version. This version contains preliminary support for Wayland. This is maybe not entirely ready for prime time, so that some people who actually understand Wayland can poke at it. This version only supports blanking, not locking. We'll get to that. It's not because it couldn't be supported, it's because that just hadn't been worked on yet. It requires compositor support for either all KDE KWin idle or ext idle notifier v1 protocols. That means everything but GNOME, I think. Fading in and out and grabbing screen images requires the program Grim to be installed and work. And it does not work under GNOME or KDE. I don't know if that's true with KDE. I thought it did. Maybe I'm wrong there. It is unable to configure DPMS or detect changes with it. And since then, there have been further updates to the Wayland support in 6.12. DPMS works on Wayland using WLR Output Power Management Unstable v1 or KDE DPMS. Fading should perform much better on both Wayland and X11. GNOME continues to be unsupported. Oh dear, how sad. Never mind. Still no locking. Again, because he hasn't done the work yet. Regarding that work, I have barely begun to think about locking, but probably ext session lock, that is the session locking protocol, that is the screen locking protocol, is going to continue to be the only game in town, even though it is absolutely the wrong way to go about any of this. Anyway, it takes a list of surfaces which are the only ones displayed while locked. Possibly we can get the underlying Wayland surface out of the X11 screensaver windows and feed those into it. I guess the XScreensaver auth window would have to be reparented under one of those. Now, this links to a prior comment that he made about 2 years ago over here. Well, ext session lock is itself a non-starter. There is no sane reason to perpetuate the old model where screensavers have to read passwords and talk to Pam. Authentication belongs in the display manager. It's already there since they've already implemented screen locking. Not using the same code path would be madness. His concern is that if he wants to build a screensaver application, he shouldn't also have to do screen locking. There are good screen lockers out there, whether it be SDDM, GDM, the upcoming PLM, LightDM, any of those. There's no reason to make another one just to do screen saving. Rather than having it be where you have to do everything, the protocol should be a way to pass in screensavers, pass in a visual that you can show on the lock screen rather than having to do everything yourself. It's hard to say exactly why it was made the way it was, but judging from what I've read from Wayland developers, I think the best guess is that a lot of them just don't really care about screensavers. Maybe they don't really hate them. It's just not something they are that interested in. It's important to have a generic way to have a good working screen locker. This is the point of EXT Session Lock. This is why you have lock screens that work on Sway, Mango WC, Hyperland, Neri, and a bunch of other environments, and actually do proper screen locking and don't have to be directly tied into that environment like you have with something like GDM. But because there was no interest in really caring about screensavers, that aspect of design was never really considered with the protocol. I agree, it would be a vastly better idea to have a convenient way for these two applications to communicate with each other. That's just not the world we live in, sadly. I guess propose a new protocol and try to get that passed, but without doing that, you kind of just have to work with what you got. On that note, there is a desktop that is working on screensaver support. Let's hop on over to Linux Mint and the Cinnamon project, the monthly news for January 2026, posted on February 11th. Let's search for Screensaver, Cinnamon, Screensaver, and Wayland. The Cinnamon screensaver only works in X11. It's a standalone application which runs in its own process and uses the GTK toolkit. X11 is responsible for making sure it sits on top of Cinnamon's window manager and hides the windows when the screen is locked. One of the goals for the next Linux Mint release is to implement a new screensaver which will 1. Replace the existing one, work in both Wayland and X11, so I would imagine they just add in... I can't imagine actually fully replacing it, probably just branching off the code base, and then adding in that additional Wayland support, and then be natively rendered by Cinnamon's window manager compositor, depending on whether you're on X11 or on Wayland. The benefits are significant. Smoother transition/animation during screen lock, better integrated look and feel, will be using the same toolkit as the one made for the panel, menus, and applets, and full Wayland support. This is the last missing piece of the puzzle for Cinnamon to fully support Wayland. Now, I've not played with their Wayland session. If you install Mint right now, there is the option to install the experimental Cinnamon Wayland. Try it out, see what it's like. I should get around to doing so. My understanding from what I've heard, though, is it's still pretty early. Granted, the last I heard about it was probably a good 6 months ago, so maybe things have drastically changed since then. Wayland support so far has been experimental. Once all the pieces are in place, we can support it and start testing it as a potential solution. We know there are pros and cons to X11 and Wayland, and we want to support both. Supporting Wayland doesn't mean we'll start using it by default, but it makes it a possibility. As always, we'll end up using what works best for most users. So this isn't our main point here, but again, with Cinnamon, they're gonna support both. Like with XScreensaver, they're gonna support both. I know you probably heard, anytime that Wayland comes up, that means X11's immediately gonna go away. No, that's not happening, especially if it's Cinnamon, right? Cinnamon, they just take whatever pace they feel like taking. But what about your major desktop environments, GNOME and KDE? So, again, a lot of Linux developers, a lot of Wayland developers aren't the biggest fans of screen locking. On KDE, you can kind of approximate having a screensaver. Now, you're not going to be able to load your XScreensaver stuff, things like that, but there was this merge request made back in 2024. Enable use as a screensaver. This is on KScreenLocker. Basically, it lets you hide all of the elements of the screen locker, so all you see is the wallpaper in the background, and that can be an animated wallpaper, that can be a wallpaper on a slideshow, things like that. This serves the primary function of a screensaver. If you want a screensaver that is there to save your older screens, like your CRTs, or your modern screens, like your OLEDs, having an image that changes every so often is gonna serve that role. If what you want from a screensaver is a bunch of flying toasters, this isn't all the way there. The screen locker is already in essence a screensaver, allowing one to hide the unlock controls and clock, show various types of wallpaper, slideshows, etc. This is great since screensavers are almost non-existent these days, and they're still wanted by many people. The only thing missing in reality is the ability to use a screensaver without requiring a password to unlock. Now this part, this is mentioned in their screen locking page, and this is probably not going to happen. What was it down the bottom? Yeah, here we go. Screen lockers without locking, no valid use case, should no longer be supported. Even though it may not be the intention out of the box, with a bit of tinkering, you can have an animation and things like that, so this basically serves the role of being a screensaver. They don't tend to market it as a screensaver, they don't really show you how to easily configure it as a screensaver, but it's basically a screensaver. As for GNOME, obviously you can do your whole, like, fake full screen window, no security, and this serves the function of being a screensaver. Obviously, that's not going to have screen locking, but if your goal is simply just to be a screensaver, you can do something like this and basically fake it. To my understanding, it's not currently possible, and I'm not aware of any interest within GNOME to have proper screen saving. Maybe it's possible with a plugin? I'm not aware of any where it would be, though. What we don't have on Wayland, and probably won't ever have due to the way that protocols are adopted, is the way the XScreensaver worked on X11, where it worked across basically everything. Some desktop environments on Wayland choose to basically require the use of their login manager, of their display manager, and don't support the ext session lock protocol. Now, for all of the environments that do support that protocol, when XScreensaver does start supporting it, does have locking working properly on Wayland, all of those environments are going to be able to use it like any other display manager. But that's probably as wide coverage as you're going to get. For anything else, it's gonna have to be built for that specific environment. For why it's taken so long to get here, really, it's because screensavers are just not as important as they once were. Obviously, with OLED displays, and I know someone's gonna mention it, OLED displays, you don't want to have a static image on it for way too long. That's totally fair. But if you ask a dev that doesn't like screensavers, they're going to tell you to just power down the screen or black out the screen. And that's something that pretty much every environment supports. When you have a screen locker, it's also going to sleep the screen, and that sort of fixes that issue. I understand it's not as fun. I agree. It's nowhere near as fun. But when startup time isn't anywhere near as bad as it was on a CRT, it's not really that big of a deal. I would like nice, stupid animations everywhere, stupid, bubbly stuff, all that good fun. That's just not the direction that things have gone. Thankfully, XScreensaver is coming to Wayland, is working on this stuff, so it should get better over time. But let me know, are you a fan of screensavers? Do you happen to use one if you're still on X11? Have you played around with the Wayland version of XScreensaver? I'd love to know. So, let me know your thoughts down below. If you liked the video, go like the video, go subscribe as well, and if you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe to Daily Bearer Pay, linked in the description down below. That's gonna be it for me, and fun's not allowed. Something like this.